Want more of me? Who doesn't? Subscribe to the Volume YouTube channel today. I've been trying to get my buddy Ryen Russillo on forever. He's busy. He's got a podcast. And so we have him scheduled for today. And the Donovan Mitchell story breaks. And I know exactly what Russillo's thinking. Cowherd, I'm not giving you my best shit, so don't expect a lot from me. So I thought to myself, sometimes you get lucky. So I know you have stuff to do. But I'm going to throw my takeaway on this at you, and you just shoot it down, is that I understand there's value in who won the trade. But if I think you're a pretty good team, Cleveland, and you got the best player, Cleveland, it falls into the I don't really care who won the trade because I can't wait to watch the Cavs. Because I thought last year, I'm like, shit, they're a player and a year away. So I don't know who won the trade, but it does feel like Mitchell is kind of what they need. Do you see it that way?
He's exactly what they need, Colin. I mean, this is a Cavs team I liked watching last year. I loved Darius coming out of the draft. It was a little hard because, he was smaller. He didn't have a ton of playing time. I mean, honestly, like when you look back at Kyrie's Duke year, he barely played. And then you just realize what a special talent he was. And I'm not saying Darius is Kyrie. In a way, I hope he isn't. But there were some similarities there. And it's really apparent that, he's a special guard. And Cleveland, I think in a weird way, was like, hey, if Sexton is going to be out, we can kind of give the keys to Darius and go. So then on top of that, you get Allen, you got Mobley. So they're doing something a little bit more traditional. So my point is this, is all the Cavs games that I watched, and I watched a lot of them because I just like the young players, their shot creation all fell on Garland at the end of games. It was a joke. And if you go into fourth quarter offensive efficiency, where last year they were 19th in the NBA. And I think in their clutch time, it was even worse. It was so apparent that Garland was just supposed to left to dribble and create all on its own. They bring in Caris LeVert to try to ease that a little bit. And everybody likes Caris LeVert until they get him on their team. They're like, oh, okay. Like this guy's playing his own game here. So if you factor in that, yes, you won the trade because you got the best player, which is what a GM told me when I first started covering the league 20 years ago. He goes, more often than not, you look at the history, when you get the best player, you end up winning the trade. I'm not saying they're going to win the East, but they solved a massive problem because when it comes to shot creation, and we can get into all the Mitchell, who is he, overrated, underrated, and all that stuff. He is a fantastic shot creator. So it is a huge look. It's the player. He was available, the package, all that stuff. But for what they needed somebody else that was another threat with the ball in his hands and as a shooter. And that's exactly what Mitchell is.
There's been a theory for years in all sports, certainly the Packers, that Midwest teams have to overpay in trades or free agency to get players. I don't know if that's true, but I will say this, is that and I go to a couple Jazz games a year. I like Danny Ainge. I like what they're doing. It's a one-horse town. So they'll be patient, right? They'll sit it out and be patient. And they've had a lot of success. They've always been fairly viable. But here's the thing I don't love about these total rebuilds. So even Giannis, I think the best player in the league, it took about till year 4 where you were like, whoa, he's getting to a top 5 player, right? So, just throw LeBron out of it. Most of these guys come out now, these draft picks, they're 19. Forget physically ready. They're just not emotionally ready. So when you do these rebuilds, Ryan, what I don't like about it, you're asking your fans, even if we hit on the draft picks, it's 3 years after that until you can really go into the playoffs and be viable. Now, you can obviously add pieces, but Danny Ainge tends to be I want to win the trade or I'm not making the trade. And again, Utah's not a big free agent destination. So I understand his plan, Ryan, but man, I think what you charge fans today, it's a hard sell. And you're really good at this personnel in the NBA drafting stuff. I always trust your opinions. But shit, man, it's hard. I got 1 year of college tape with an overbearing college coach. It feels like there's more misses than ever out of the draft.
Yeah, if you start looking at the top 10 in recent drafts too, it's remarkable how many of those top 10 players are on a new team by year 2 or 3. It's more than 50% of the top 10. Like I used to think the later picks in the first round were totally overvalued. And I did talk to a GM who heard me say it like 5 years ago, where I just started looking at it. And I'm like, you trade your guy for like a 20 and a 27, and then it's really exciting. Like, oh, we have 3 first rounders. If you get a rotation guy in the 20s, you crushed it. Okay. And as I started,
That's right.
and everybody wants to go like, well, what about Draymond Green and Manu Ginobili? Like, yeah, man, awesome. Like when Hickey would stockpile all these second rounders and everybody would like act like it meant anything, it didn't mean anything. The second rounders are even worse. So when I started talking about the overvaluing of first round picks, I had a GM who's pretty smart who was like, I don't always agree with you, but because I heard what you said about the first rounders, because that's how we've been running our business now for a couple of years. Like, I don't care. Like, we're a pretty good team. We're generally always a pretty good team. We're a destination. We feel like we're always in play for some guys. And like, why do I care about like pick 22? Like maybe I hit it and it's a cheap rotation guy, but chances are it's like less than a 50% win. So I'll give you a bunch of those. And so the weird thing is now that we've seen all these trades happen, I think a lot of GMs have decided, yeah, I don't care about these picks either. Like, let's go. Like when you think about the Kawhi trade from San Antonio to Toronto, and you're like, all right, so you got DeRozan, who actually is, he's an odd player in that he's gotten so much better so much later in his career. He's like a total aberration. Right. And then you throw in Pirtle, who, I sneaky still kind of like a little bit. But if that trade were done today, even with the 1 year left on Kawhi's deal, knowing that Toronto's probably not a free agent destination, there's at least a couple unprotected firsts thrown into that. And that's how quickly this has changed. But part of me also wonders at times, it's like, do you guys actually want a player back that's any good? Or do you just want to be able to say, oh, I have all of these draft picks? Now, for certain places who are worried about re-signing their own guys, then it makes sense. You're right. Utah's probably a bottom 3 free agent destination. I would argue that like Dallas and Chicago are cities that we would think are always free agent destinations, and even they don't. So I'm not even a huge fan of stockpiling all this cap space because, and I know Ainge is, he's told me straight up years ago when I was in Boston, he goes, all you guys in the media stockpiling this cap space, he's like, that means I'm waiting around with a plan with no idea who I'm getting. So he was like, I'm always more into the trades. So the first round movement of the last couple of years is definitely a product of GMs realizing these picks aren't that valuable. But I think it's in a weird way on the other side of the receiving team. They value the ability to say, oh, we have 5 picks now moving forward. And I'm like, at some point I want a nice player. So if the Shams report was correct, that the Knicks offered RJ Barrett and 2 unprotected firsts, if that's correct, and Shams is better at this stuff than I am, I would take that deal 10 out of 10 times over the Cleveland package, because all of these players, like Markkanen's kind of a disappointment. Sexton, Cleveland didn't want to pay him. And now you pay him, and it's not a ton of money, and it's fine. And then, Agbaji, who, might be a marginal rotation player, who knows?